If you already own a property in Australia, there's a good chance you could buy your next investment property a lot sooner than you think. And no, it doesn't mean you need to save another deposit. Most people still think you've got to squirrel away for years, build up another 20% and go again. But that's slow. And for most people these days, it's completely unrealistic. Hey, I'm Jason. I'm a mortgage broker. I've helped hundreds of everyday Australians turn one home into a growing property portfolio using equity. I worked in commercial property research with CBRE and Colliers. I was previously a buyer's agent, worked as a head of credit as a lender, and supported award-winning brokerages in scaling up. So I get how the banks think, and more importantly, I know how to make this work for people like you. In this video, I want to show you how equity really works, how to access it safely, and the steps we use with our clients to go from one property to 2 to 3 and more. I'll even run you through real numbers so you can actually see how it works. Alright, let's start from the top. Equity is the difference between what your property is worth and how much you owe on it. So let's say your place is worth $700,000 and you've got a $400,000 loan. That's $300,000 in equity. Here's the thing, you can't use all of it. Most banks will let you borrow up to 80 or 90% of your property's value. That's your usable equity. In this case, 80% of $700K is $560,000. Subtract your loan of $400,000 and that leaves you with $160,000 in usable equity. That's money you can use to fund another purchase without selling your home and without having to save a deposit from scratch again. Let's walk through exactly how equity builds year by year using real numbers so you can actually see how it works in practice. Let's say you buy your first investment property for $500,000. You borrow 80% of that, so your loan is $400,000. That means you've put in $100,000 yourself to cover your deposit and costs. Now, to keep it simple, we'll assume two things happen every year. First, your property grows in value by 5%. Second, you chip away at your loan and pay down around $5,000 in principal every year. So what does that mean for your equity? In year one, your property goes up to $525,000. Your loan drops slightly to $395,000. The bank will usually let you borrow up to 80% of the new value, which is around $420,000. So if you owe $395,000, but the bank would lend you $420,000, that means you've got about $25,000 in usable equity. Not bad for year one. Not enough to buy again yet, but you're building momentum. By year two, the property is now worth just over $551,000. Your loan has dropped to $390,000. 80% of that new value is about $441,000. So now you've got about $51,000 in usable equity. That's already getting close to what you need for another property, especially if you use a 90% loan. We won't go into detail as to what that entails, but just know that at this stage, you can already potentially purchase another property. By year three, the property value is just under $579,000. Your loan is down to $385,000. 80% of that value is about $463,000. That gives you roughly $78,000 in usable equity. Year four, your property hits just over $607,000. Your loan is down to $380,000. 80% of the new value is roughly $486,000, and your usable equity has just cracked the six-figure mark, roughly about $106,000. At this point, you're ready to make your next move. You could buy again without needing to save another cent. In year five, your property keeps growing. It's now worth about $638,000. Your loan's down to $375,000. That gives you roughly $135,000 in usable equity. Enough to fund a second property easily, or even two if you structure it right. By year six, your property is worth $670,000 roughly. The loan's down to $370,000. That means the bank would let you borrow up to $536,000, giving you around 166,000 in usable equity. So, over a period of 6 years, just from natural growth and slowly paying down the loan, you've unlocked more than 165 grand in usable equity. You haven't saved another dollar. You haven't changed anything major. You've just let time and the market work for you and chipped away at the loan. And this is where the equity flywheel starts. Your first property helps you buy the second, then those two helps you buy the third, and from there it just keeps growing. Here's how you get your hands on that equity. Number 1, get a valuation. Lenders use firms like Heron Todd White or CBRE, and values can differ. This isn't just a formality. The valuation determines how much usable equity you'll be able to release. One lender might value your property at $700,000, while another might come in at $740,000. The difference could unlock tens of thousands more in usable equity. A good broker knows which lenders are likely to value higher and request multiple valuations on your behalf, often for free. Number 2, choose your path by refinancing with a new lender or topping up with your current one. Refinancing means replacing your current loan with a new one, usually to access better rates or terms, and releasing equity at the same time. A top-up keeps you with your current bank, but increasing your existing loan to pull out equity. Each option has pros and cons. Choosing the right one depends on your interest rate, lender policy, and how flexible you need your structure to be. Your broker can walk you through what's best based on your goals and your timeline. Step 3, check your borrowing capacity. Borrowing capacity is your fuel, but equity is the engine. The equity gives you the structure to build on, but it is your borrowing power that determines whether that engine can actually run. Without both, you can't move forward. Let's break that down because that trips up a lot of people. Equity is the portion of your property you own outright. It's what gives you security to borrow. The banks don't just lend based on what you own. They lend based on what you can afford to repay. That's your borrowing capacity. It comes down to your income, your expenses, your debts, and how stable your finances look. Here's an example. Let's say you've got a ton of equity. Maybe your home's gone up $300,000 in value over the years. Great, right? But if you've recently changed jobs, or your income's taken a hit, or you've maxed out your serviceability with other loans, you might not be able to borrow at all. So even though you've got the engine sitting there, without fuel, you're not going anywhere. That's why planning ahead matters. We don't just look at what your equity is doing. We look at what your numbers can support and how to line everything up so that when you're ready to act, the bank is too. And finally, step 4, the most important, have a strategy before you access a dollar. Know the goal, property type, and the structure. This is one of the biggest turning points for investors because strategy is what links your equity to your outcome. Without it, equity just becomes potential debt. And I've seen people get caught here. Let's say you've released $120,000 in equity, enough to buy an investment property. If you don't know your plan, whether you're aiming for yield or growth, passive or active management, you might end up buying the wrong property in the wrong area. Or even just sitting on the money while inflation eats away at it. Now, let me show you 2 simple examples. Investor A has a plan. They want capital growth in the metropolitan area, plan to hold for 7 years, and have a strong income. They target a suburb with rising infrastructure investment. Buy slightly under market value with their released equity, use a standalone mortgage facility to keep their structure clean. Their equity starts compounding within 12 months. Investor B has no plan. They release equity because they saw a news article about an emerging hotspot. They buy an apartment in a high-rise building with oversupply. It sits vacant for 4 months. Cash flow tanks. Loan repayments continue. Stress builds. Same amount of equity. Completely different outcomes. That's why we always start with a strategy. It's not a checkbox. It's a compass that guides every other decision. Now that you know how equity builds over time and how to access it, it's just important to know what not to do. Mistake number 1. releasing equity without a clear plan. It's like borrowing $100,000 without knowing what you're going to do with it, except you're paying interest on that loan the whole time. Here's a real-world example. Someone I spoke to accessed around $120,000 in equity. Their intention was to buy an investment property, but they didn't know what type of property to buy, what their budget really allowed for, or even which state they wanted to buy in. Without a plan, they just froze. That money sat in their offset account for over a year. Meanwhile, the market moved on and inflation chipped away at what that 120 could actually buy. When they finally bought, they rushed into something that wasn't a right fit just because they felt guilty about sitting on that money. And that property didn't perform. They ended up worse off than before. Mistake 2. Cross-securitization. At first glance, this can sound like a smart move because you're using all your properties together to get a loan. But here's the issue. It links your properties like a chain. If one part of the chain breaks, everything's affected. Let's break it down simply. Imagine you own property A and it's worth $1 million. You then decide to buy property B and the bank says, great, we'll give you a loan for property B, but we're going to tie it to property A as security. That's cross-securitization. Now, here's where the risk creeps in. If you want to sell property B later or maybe refinance property A to get a better rate, the bank can block you. Why? Because both properties are linked. The bank wants to make sure that the overall position stays safe, and that could mean denying your request until you jump through a heap of hoops. I've seen people try to sell one property only to be told by the bank, not unless you pay off a big chunk of the other loan first. Or they want to restructure but can't because all their properties are tangled up. Now, compare that to standalone facilities. With standalone mortgage facilities, each property is like its own little island. If you need to sell one or refinance another, the others are untouched. You keep more control. And when you're building a portfolio, that flexibility matters a lot. So while cross-securitization might seem neat or efficient at first, for most people, it's just adding risk and removing options down the track. Mistake number 3. Thinking you need to wait for the perfect time. That sounds logical at first, but here's the issue. While you wait too long, you can actually make things harder for yourself, not easier. Let's explain this in simple terms. Your ability to access equity depends on 2 things: how much a property is worth and how much the bank thinks you can afford to borrow. That's it. But both of these numbers are constantly changing. Now, imagine this. You've got a property that's gone up in value. You're earning decent income. And you're thinking about refinancing to access that equity. You say to yourself, let's just wait until the market goes up a little bit more so that I have more equity. So you wait. And in that time, interest rates rise, which means that the bank thinks your repayments will cost more. Your suburbs growth slows or flattens. Maybe you cut back your hours at work or take a short career break. Suddenly, even if your property is still technically worth more, your borrowing capacity has dropped. I had a client in this exact situation. They waited 18 months, and in that time, their ability to borrow went down, their usable equity went down, and they missed the window where they could have comfortably bought a second property. Instead of moving forward, they had to wait another 2 years to rebuild their position. So here's the point. There's no perfect time. There's just the right time for your circumstances. The longer you wait, the more variables shift, and not always in your favor. So what should you take away from this? What I tell my clients is that equity is just not some nice to have. You earn it, and it can be the launch pad to real wealth if you use it right. If it just sits there, it's like leaving $200,000 under your mattress. So here's what I tell my clients. Use it when you've got it, as long as you can afford the repayments. Have a plan before you do, and build your team around you so you're not doing it alone. In case you have available equity and you want to map out exactly what this could look like for you, what you can access, what's realistic, and what's next, I've left a link to book in a free strategy call below. No pressure, no jargon, just clarity. If you found this helpful, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.